excited today to have Rijon Charne here with us on our guest speaker in good company, supporting real people in surrogacy. At C Trust, we want to see the people behind the scenes, and we're not just a company in this space, we're a team of real people who care deeply. And so these interviews are helping intended parents, surrogates, and donors really just get aligned on best practices in the industry. And so today we have an attorney from Sunray Fertility, Rijon Charne, with us, and she's going to kind of tell us a little bit about herself. And we're going to go through some areas that she's super passionate about and some best practices she recommends in this space. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. So glad to be here, Kaitlyn. Love it. Love working with C-Trust. Great partner. So very happy to be here.
Awesome. Excited to have you. So as we kind of jump into this, as some know, there's different roles that kind of go into a fertility journey. You have your egg donation role for some, and then you have your surrogacy role for others. I kind of wanted to touch on the legal perspectives from each kind of role and kind of get your opinion of what you think is most important with these roles. First being the intended parent side of things. So, from a legal perspective, what should intended parents really understand as they're embarking on an egg donation or surrogacy for the first time?
Yeah, absolutely. So the most important thing that I always tell clients is that from a legal perspective, a lot of clients are like, isn't this just a templatized agreement? Isn't it just the same for every journey? And it's like, I always say, I'd be lying if I drafted, 25 to 45 pages each time. So of course, everybody starts with the template. But to me, every journey is so different. Every person has wants and needs. And this is such a personal journey that to just consider using a template as like the main agreement to me is completely detrimental to both the surrogate, intended parents, and the egg donor. And so from a legal perspective, right, some of the most important things to take into account is that every state has its own laws, and laws dictate how enforceable your contract will be, whether you can establish parentage for the child prior to birth or after birth, and what risks you might face when something goes wrong. And when something does go wrong, the only place that you can go back to is that contract. So that contract not only has to, express your journey, but it has to be rock solid so that it's the guiding light throughout the pregnancy. In regards to some of the things that I think everybody should really be aware of, right, is contractual clarity. So, like ensuring that the agreement covers medical decision making, compensation, expectations around communication, what happens in unforeseen circumstances. And one of the most important things, which is sometimes very uncomfortable for parents, is to have really open and clear conversations with your surrogate about the termination of the pregnancy and really each other's expectations, especially if a surrogate has been through surrogacy before. Chances are she's going to know what she wants. She's going to know what the requirements are, what the requests are, and understanding what those requests are before we get to legal and making sure that you're okay with those requests will make the legal period go much more smoothly and usually quicker because the parents aren't shocked by some of the requests in that aspect of things. Some of the other really important things are jurisdictional realities. We as Sunray Fertility are licensed in 8 different states at this point. And so understanding that multi-jurisdictional aspect and having to keep on top of all the changes of laws in all of those different states, right, really allow us to guide intended parents on the best jurisdiction that we should be able to draft that contract under. Just because you're based in North Carolina doesn't mean that's the law we're going to use because they don't really have one, right, versus California, and like what that's going to look like, and really understanding what that is. And that's really where the attorney comes in strong. And then last but not least is how important is parentage rights to the intended parents to be obtained prior to birth or post-birth, right? In a state like Florida, post-birth is what the statute requires. That makes some intended parents uncomfortable because they really want to have a pre-birth order like in California where the parents' rights are established prior to birth. So those are just some of the, I would say, most important things from a perspective of understanding it from a legal contract.
Absolutely. So I guess kind of one question that I had in kind of this is when intended parents come to you for the first time, Are they, do they know what to ask? Do they know what to look for? Are you really having to kind of guide on these are some really important topics? This is what you should be discussing with your surrogates or your donors. Or do they kind of come in knowing kind of the process of everything?
It really depends on how much research the parents have done.
Okay.
One of the things I love to do is I like to consider myself to be like an educator, right? I've
Yeah.
been doing this for a long time. And so I really like to try and educate parents so that they can understand what everything is going to look like. They get so many things thrown at them at any given time that it's incredibly, incredibly overwhelming and it's very
Yeah.
stressful. And so I tell them, like, consider me your advisor, not just your attorney, right? So when they come to me, some of them don't know about insurance. They've never been told
Yeah.
about insurance liens before. They don't even understand that legal usually needs to happen after medical clearance. And like, if you start before medical clearance, what that looks like, what you can expect as things go wrong. What are some of the things, sorry, what you can expect as things progress. What are
Yeah.
some things that can go wrong? And so it really just depends. Some intended parents come to me very educated. They're like, oh, we did all this research. And I'm like, great. So what questions do you have for me? So it's really just dependent on the person. And that
Yeah.
goes towards surrogates and egg donors as well, right? It's really important for
Right.
them to understand what they're signing up for because they are really the ones who have a much higher chance of breach in a sense than the intended parents do because everything is really relying on them.
Absolutely. So that's good you bring that point up as well. So kind of twisting gears here to the surrogates from a legal perspective, really what should they be looking at? What are the big points of topics that they should be having with their attorneys? Just really what is important there with them.
Absolutely. So one of the most important things is that for any egg donor or surrogate, sometimes intended parents to cut costs try and push that, we can just do it with one attorney. No, you can't. I mean, could you? Should. Do I recommend it? Absolutely not. Because if parentage or any part of the agreement is ever called into question, the first thing the judge is going to ask is, did you have independent counsel? Were you represented fairly? And it's very difficult for an attorney to correctly balance both of that out, right? In the case of
Absolutely.
how it may be.
So kind of switching gears here to gestational carriers and really what they should be looking for from a legal perspective. What advice would you give them, or what are some areas that you really feel like they really need to understand what terms they're agreeing to?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the most important things for an egg donor surrogate, anybody going through it, right, intended parents, is to really have independent counsel. It is the most important thing. Sometimes people try and cut costs by taking away that independent counsel, right?
Yeah,
And it's a really big problem because if the contract ever comes into play and they ask if you were fairly represented, it's going to be quite difficult for an attorney to say that I represented opposing sides, right? They yes may have been aligned, but maybe not aligned on everything. And how do you kind of differentiate that? So everybody, intended parents and surrogates and egg donors or any donors, should have the right to independent counsel. And for surrogacy, a lot of statutes require independent counsel. Um,
right.
the other option is for the surrogate to be able to make her own decisions during pregnancy, right? Of course, you contract for certain decisions that should be made, but whatever she has contracted to, she needs to be comfortable with that if it plays out in reality, she understands what she's agreed to, whether it's an induction, whether it's not an induction, whether it's C-section, whether it's vaginal delivery, like whatever it may be. But she needs to be the one in control of that, and the contract needs to state that. Last but not least is really the confidentiality, right?
Yeah,
That she has confidentiality to her personal information and that she agrees to have confidentiality with the intended parents as well as the child. A lot of people post ultrasounds of the baby. That's great, but just make sure the intended parents agreed that was okay in the agreement and that ultrasound doesn't have anybody's names on there because it would be a breach of confidentiality. So that's kind of a couple things. And then for her, one of the most important things is to make sure she understands really what she's signing up for from a
yeah,
responsibility perspective. Following medical protocols, attending appointments when she's required, that may interfere with her job, that may interfere with her life, her children. So understanding what that looks like and being very clear on that. And then also honoring the expectations around communication and future contact between her and the intended parent. Some intended parents are like, yeah, once a week is great. Other intended parents are like, I want it 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at this time. Okay, if that's contracted and that's what you agree to, then that's what you need to understand you're going to uphold throughout the pregnancy. And are you okay with that? So those are some, I would say, probably some of the most important things.
Absolutely. And do you ever get I would just say like really questions about surrogates and the compensation piece of things, or I mean, are they going into these agreements fully understanding, what they're going to be compensated for, what they're able to ask for reimbursements through escrow? Do they kind of come knowing those details of everything, or is that something that you guys really have to discuss with them?
Most of the time, honestly, no. They understand to a degree, and obviously, this isn't speaking for everybody, right? But for
Right.
the average surrogate that we do reviews for, they had looked at the benefits package. Some agencies do an amazing job of explaining it to them, and others don't. It's just kind of like, this is what it is. Are you
Yeah.
okay with it? And they don't even understand that. Could they potentially negotiate it? Is this like industry standard, right? And all of those sorts of things. And so by the time they get to us, we look through it, and of course, we really try never to change the agreement with the benefits package, and since unless something is so heinous or it's so far from industry standard, right? And then it's like,
Yeah.
hold on, where did this come from? But once that benefits package is signed, that comp package in the agreement, right, should mirror that exactly. And then in regards to understanding how the payments work, a lot of surrogates don't understand it. That's one of the biggest questions I get as pregnancies progress is, hey, I didn't receive
Right.
this payment. Should I receive this payment? When should I receive this payment? And then, of course, working with a partner like Seeds Trust, right, who responds really quickly, is super knowledgeable in escrow holding, etc., is it's really fantastic because they are the ones holding the money, right? And they are the ones releasing the money when it's supposed to be released. So if there's an issue, being able to contact you is really helpful.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, I had kind of had that question. That was more of a personal probably question for myself of just, knowing if they knew really the compensation package. Because we do get a lot of questions from surrogates just in regards to some of those payments. So
I can imagine.
um yeah, absolutely. So thank you for kind of going over that process a little bit more in depth, and really what you guys' role is and what you're seeing as surrogates are coming in there.
Yeah.
So kind of switching gears here a little bit, what do you see are some typical points of misunderstandings? I know you kind of touched on that a little bit, um, but are there some really key aspects of where most journeys, this is where we see the most misunderstandings between all parties?
Yeah, I would say that the two biggest mismatches or things that are like, oh yeah, this is fine, but then it creates problems down the road.
Yeah,
It's communication style and preference. That's a really big thing. And people kind of like, brush it off. It's like, oh, we'll figure it out. But like, that's actually not good enough. Like having very clear understandings of, okay, I need to respond within 24 hours. I need to keep the intended parents updated because this is their child. They're concerned about their child. They don't know what's happening on a daily basis. But then from an intended parents perspective, with the anxiety being very high, which is completely
yeah,
understandable as well, to remember that this is another person, a surrogate who has her own life, her own children, everything else, and really finding that balance because really that has created a lot, like not a lot, but it sometimes creates sourness between a surrogacy that could have been great. It just wasn't communicated correctly.
right.
Um, and one of the other big mismatches is done usually before legal. And
Okay,
unfortunately, some agencies don't do a great job in making sure that the parents and the surrogate align with the abortion or termination
good.
preferences.
That's such a huge area as well. Like,
It is, and really understanding what those nuances, right? If we
right,
contract that somebody can terminate or the intended parents can terminate for any genetic disorder, physical abnormality, right? That means anything that they deem not to be perfect or normal, right?
yeah,
If a surrogate isn't comfortable with that, they're not comfortable terminating for down syndrome, cleft palate, like whatever it may be, or they only want to terminate for an aspect of, life will be so severely like so severely impacted, right? Like
right,
after birth. That is a nuance that needs to be discussed and put into the agreement. And some people find it very uncomfortable to talk about, which I totally get too. But I'm really understanding that and having those communications with your surrogate before legal is really important. But I'd say to me, those are probably some of the biggest mismatches that occur just in regards to drafting and like where the contract sours sometimes.
yeah. No, I can see that, especially because those are such, heavy topics, and people have very strong opinions of those things. So yeah, I would think discussing that prior to going to the legal is huge, just so everyone's kind of on the same page there.
It is. And I always tell my clients, like, Google is amazing for so many things, or I guess you can say ChatGPT now is amazing for so
Yeah.
many things. But Google, for example, is actually a pretty bad at this industry because it just doesn't keep up. You've got a lot of blogs or posts that are written by people who are not in the industry, they're not experts, maybe they had a bad journey, like whatever it may be. And so, we really at Sunray love to build in like the education in the front of every case. So I find it like the most important to speak about what your concerns are. Do you understand what this looks like? What are some of the
Yeah.
things that can go wrong? What are some of the common red lines that we get from surrogates or egg donors, attorneys, right? And what that looks like. And it's like one of my favorite parts to educate the clients what they need.
Absolutely. Yeah, the educational piece of things. I'm right there with you because people don't know what they don't know, you know?
100%.
So
100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's the biggest opportunity yourself and I feel like C Trust has with this industries and just people going through this is really just being able to educate like best practices. These are things that you really need to be looking for, conversations that need to be had. Is such a huge component of all of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise in that. Kind of switching over to the escrow side of things here. As people I'm sure watching this know, C Trust, we're an escrow provider in this space. And in your experience and your opinion, why do you feel having an independent escrow provider is important?
So, this is a really great question. The reason why I'm smiling is because the other day we got a request from a client. It was an independent journey, and they wanted a family member of the surrogate to hold trust for them, to deem that person as a neutral person to hold it because they didn't want to pay the fees for an escrow company.
Mhm.
And it was a really interesting conversation because I understand where they're coming from in the sense of, maybe we can trust this person more, whatever it is. But I had to explain to them that that person's not really neutral, right?
Right.
That person is somebody who has rent and expenses, and this is a lot of money that they're going to see in an escrow account, and I have no idea who that person is. I cannot speak for their character or their morals, but if you go with the general concept of money can make people ugly, right? When you have a really neutral third party escrow company who has no skin in the game whatsoever, right? From that perspective, it
Yeah.
really creates, I would say, a level of trust or openness for both
Yeah.
parties to have equal access to what they need. And I think that's the most important.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of similar conversation I had yesterday with a prospective intended parent and going through an independent journey as well and just not understanding the need to have the escrow account when, even just going to like, well, can I just Venmo, my surrogate or, can I just send them, Zelle or pick up things here and there and yeah, just having someone that's completely neutral to all parties and really just looking at the contract and making sure that that's being followed and what's being requested is going to be reimbursed or not reimbursed if it's not warranted in the contract. So yeah, I'm right there with you. It's huge to make it, and I think just to make the journey go smoother too. And it's finance, people don't want to talk about finances.
No, finances can make people very uncomfortable. And so it's like, and Kaitlyn, you and I have seen situations, right, where there's been a material breach, right? And it's kind
Yeah.
of like, okay, what do you do in a situation like that? If you don't have a neutral third party, right? Like, what then? Because
Right.
usually, if there's a significant material breach, that payment needs to stop between whoever the parties are. And how is that handled? If you're either doing the Venmo aspect of things, right? Then the intended parent, let's say, stops paying because there's a material breach, or she deems it to the intended parent deems it to be a material breach, even though it's
Yeah.
not, it's just
It's
something maybe she
not.
doesn't like, then she's in breach, right? And so being able to really have a neutral third party who can communicate with the attorneys to say, hey, is this actually a material breach is
Right.
really important. And then what are those next steps?
Exactly, exactly. And we have those situations a lot, and those are questions I get asked a lot, probably more so with, intended parents are, well, what if she does something that I don't like, can I just stop payment? And I said, well, no, it doesn't work that way.
Right. Right.
So you're in contract. So that's
Yeah.
when attorneys are involved.
Yep, exactly, exactly. That's
So
why we come into play. We're always the
it,
big bad wolves, right? But it's like that's what we do. It's like we have to come in and we have to protect. So yeah.
exactly, exactly, exactly. No, and that we love the partnership with you guys for all of that and being there, just as a great partner.
Absolutely.
So I guess kind of going over with what are some best practices that you do to ensure, financial transparency and trust with your clients?
Yeah, so I mean, I if they do not have an escrow company, I recommend some escrow companies, right? I always let them know that the choice of your escrow company is your choice, right?
Yeah.
I haven't done independent audits or I haven't done independent audits on the escrow companies, myself. But understanding, are they licensed? Are they bonded? Do they have insurance? What happens if they get hacked? Like, what are all of those things, right? That the escrow company that the intended parents choose to work with, right? Are protected. And so, from that perspective, that's one of the most important things that the intended parents need to ask the escrow company in order to find out if it's the right fit.
So when speaking to your clients, what are some things that you discuss just to ensure the full financial transparency?
Absolutely. So I always tell clients that the choice of their escrow company is their choice, right? We can recommend certain escrow companies that we know have good reputations in the space, but it's really up to the intended parents to do audits on that escrow company.
Yeah.
Understand, are they bonded? Are they actually licensed? What does that look like? What happens if the escrow company gets hacked? Like, what is their backup? Hacking is obviously very common today.
Yep.
And so, what does that look like? Because obviously their money is going to be in there, and they need to know it's protected. So those are really some of the most important things that the intended parents have to figure out for their own.
Absolutely, and same things I had discussed with intended parents as well. When I speak with them, I'm like, these are some really key aspects that you want to be asking escrow providers that you're talking to, and just really, if they're not aligning with, if they're not insured and bond, that's a red flag. If they are, well, what's the dollar amount? With us, we recommend at least 10 million. And then same with just are there any oversights with how their funds are being protected? Is there one person controlling what goes in and what goes out of the accounts? With this industry, what we've seen is that's also a red flag. There doesn't need to be one person controlling all the funds. So yeah, I think just making sure that the educational piece for both surrogates and intended parents, and what they know to ask for to the other escrow providers, and making sure that they are going to go with someone who they trust and who are following those best practices.
100%.
So I guess kind of what how did you get into this industry, and really what is your passion for it, and what makes you just excited about it?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma 2 days after graduating from law school. I was supposed to be a litigation, and I was supposed to be a litigator at a big litigation firm. And when I was diagnosed, of course, my whole life was kind of put on hold.
Absolutely.
And prior to undergoing chemo, I chose to freeze my eggs as a precautionary measure. And when I did, I applied, of course, for insurance, thinking they would absolutely cover me. And no, they did not. They said that I was not medically necessary for them to cover my insurance for my egg freeze. And so I was livid, as you can
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
It's just additional expenses. And how can you tell me I'm not medically necessary when my oncologist is saying potentially otherwise, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I landed up, once I got healthy and I became a lawyer, I landed up actually advocating and I landed up changing the laws in Texas, requiring insurance companies to cover fertility preservation for cancer patients. So that is now a law in Texas. It's also spread to multiple other states. And some states have even taken it further, to include IUI or certain rounds of IVF or egg freezing. So it's been absolutely incredible to watch that. But my passion, really, it was the massive turning point in my life, and I just
Yeah.
wanted to help and um, that's kind of how I got into it. So I took all that knowledge and that passion and that love that I have for helping people and being a psychologist to people, but also being a lawyer, and growing my firm into one of the fastest growing fertility law firms in this industry, being licensed in so many states, having an incredible team of people who all share the same passion for building families and for helping. And it's been an incredible journey. It's been really, really fun. And so, having that concept of what I went through, the true
Yeah.
personal experience of both experiencing I could die, as well as, oh my gosh, what do I do if I don't? And how do I save my, genetics for the future? Understanding that push and pull has really allowed me to integrate the human side along with the legal side, and to
Yeah.
really understand where those clients are coming up from on a very personal level. And everybody in my firm has been trained with that viewpoint at hand,
Hmm.
that people going through this, a lot of them never expected they would be here. They're going
No.
through a lot, understanding that they can't use their genetics and maybe they have to use a donor, or they're not able to carry for certain circumstances, like what that emotional toll looks like. And to understand that when there's anxiety in those emails, and when people are calling 10 times over, where and why that is really coming from. And so, yeah, and then along with that emotional side, right? Um, we understand how important speed is in this industry, and
Yes.
how fast people want to get through legal so that you can do the transfer, when the time is right. But also understanding how important precision is, because you don't want to speed and then have a bad contract and then you have issues. So really being able to balance that speed with precision and the ability to navigate complex cases along with the emotional side, yeah, has that's the base of Sunray. So we love it.
Oh, wow. You have such an incredible story, and just I mean, congratulations on just your accomplishments and those laws, and just really advocating for individuals, and just making a change. I mean, that is huge. And you touched on it, but you really get to what a lot of these intended parents are going through, and then you also understand just the why behind a lot of maybe the messaging. And you're right, it's huge with this industry. People, it's emotional on all sides of it, and just having that empathy, and being empathetic towards them, it just goes such a long way.
Yeah.
And congratulations just on your success, and the difference you're making.
Thank you. Thanks. We love it. I always, I have a lot of friends who are lawyers in different spaces and they hate their lives, right? They're like miserable and like all that sort of stuff. And like, this industry never sleeps, as you know, right? Like we're
Yeah.
working weekends, we're working late at nights, emergencies pop up. Like it's like big firm kind of emergencies. I think it's even like, it's even scary emergencies, because it's like
Yeah,
get their period at any time. And it's like, oh my gosh, we got to get this going.
we gotta go.
We
Yeah.
gotta go. So it's really fun. But I always tell people, I'm like, I'm a lawyer who loves her job. I truly love my job. I don't ever wake up really and be like, oh my gosh, here we go again. It's like
Yeah.
I don't experience that. And so I consider myself to be so unbelievably fortunate. And yeah.
I couldn't agree more with you about that. It's a wonderful industry to be a part of, and um, yeah, just to be able to make a difference, and to help people at such a vulnerable part of their lives.
It
So,
is. And then how fun is it when we get baby pictures? It's like my
oh,
favorite. A
that's
whole
my
folder.
favorite. Yes.
It's my favorite.
When I get asked that question, what's your favorite part about your job? I'm like, man, it's the pictures. It's when they're closing out, their escrow account, and they say, hey, here's an update, and it's been 6 months, down the road, or 12 months down the road, and they said this is a picture of our family. Or coming back for maybe a second journey, and saying, hey, you helped us with our first, we're ready to do the second, this is where our family's at. And yeah, that's the feel good stuff. That's what the hard days, where you kind of just keep
Absolutely.
going, where you're like, man, I am making a difference, I'm helping people have, these families. And I would say that's the biggest joy. Like, I started this industry pre children, and then now I have two children, and it's actually very different with like how I kind of felt going into now, and to want to just help people be able to experience the same joy as you do on the daily. It just, yeah, it makes it all worth it. And
Yeah.
we're very fortunate to get to work in this field. So,
We are.
well, kind of closing up here. What's one advice that you can offer someone beginning all of this?
At the very beginning of their journey.
Yeah, just yeah, but yeah, as they're going into their surrogacy or egg donation journey, wherever they're kind of at, intended parent, surrogate, whatever side, what's a big piece of advice you could offer them from the beginning?
Yeah. I always tell clients having a team that you trust around you is the
Yeah,
most important thing you can do. Your lawyer needs to be somebody you feel connected with. You understand that they're going to have your best interests at heart no matter what. Your doctor is the same thing because they're going to be the ones screening your surrogates. They're going to be the one doing the transfers. Like, do you trust that person? Do you
yeah,
trust your agency that they have your back if they have to step in at any point in time? And do you have the right people holding your money? Like, when you have that kind of group together and they're people that you trust, that are highly considered experts in their field, you will have a much better journey than if you have people that you don't trust. Because the minute you don't trust or you don't feel that they have your back, you're immediately going to put your wall up, which means your anxiety is going to get higher. And then it's just kind of like a recipe for disaster in that sense. The other
right,
big piece of information that I tell clients is have a lawyer with you from the very beginning. I always say,
yeah,
choose me, don't choose me. Just make sure that you have a lawyer from the very beginning, because understanding what those agency agreements look like, understanding if your surrogate fails medical, what does that rematch look like to you? What does that
yeah,
refund look like to you? If you get any refunds, a lot of the time the agency's agreements are written very pro agency, which I understand. They're protecting themselves, but at the same time,
absolutely.
if you're an intended parent going through it, you need to understand what that looks like, and if you're uncomfortable about something, your attorney will be there to be able to answer questions, ask questions. I provide clients with questions that they can ask this. Sorry, it's like, it's kind of like this whole, like, let me be with you from the beginning in a sense, all the way through to the
Yeah,
birth of that child, that you always have this like trusted advisor that can kind of like push in which direction you need it, depending on what it is. Because there are so many times I get clients who come to me after they've signed or whatever it is, and after they're, maybe just starting their surrogacy agreement, and they're like, oh my gosh, she failed her medical, we don't know what to do. I'm like, did you read the agency agreement? Do you understand what that looks like? No, we just signed it. We were pressurized into signing it. I'm
oh,
like, oh no, oh no.
oh man.
Yeah. And so that's probably the best advice that if I was doing it, that's what I would do
Yeah.
for me, and I tell my clients the same thing. So
No, I love that. I think that's wonderful. I've actually have not heard that piece of advice from an attorney yet. So I love that, and yeah, definitely there's a need from the beginning just to make sure that everyone's understanding what they're signing and what they're getting into. So
exactly, super important.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, if intended parents, surrogates, donors want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
You can go to my website and book a consult right then and there. Consults are free, so we love to help. If not, my email is on the website as well. We respond super quick. So phone number as well. We have that too. But if they want to visit my website, sunrayfertility.com, that is the most efficient way for them to find whatever it is. Oh, Google Maps. Google Maps will pop you right up. You can hit the call button and give us a call, whichever you prefer.
Perfect, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Rijon, thank you so much for coming on and just really just discussing your passions, your best practices, and things that intended parents, surrogates, and donors can look for when they're starting out. So I appreciate you and appreciate everything you're doing.
You as well. This was wonderful. Thanks so much, Caitlin.
Absolutely, thank you.